So hi, Fiona. Thanks so much for joining us for this session. It's brilliant to have the opportunity to talk to you. Obviously, at Nielsen, we ask millions and millions of fan questions every year, and one of the things which is absolutely clear is that AT&T is one of the most iconic, longer-term sponsors in the global sponsorship market. But I wanted to start with a personal question more about you. So what role has sports played in your life? What's your sports story?
My sports story. Well, greetings from Montauk. Thank you for having me. My sports story was, I have memories of cold, muddy Suffolk days where I was a second, maybe third rate field hockey and netball player. I was always sort of on the second team, but sometimes made it onto the first team. And I went to a school with Saturday morning school. So I did Saturday morning school followed by competitive sport in the afternoon. So I never really thought of myself as an athlete, but I enjoyed it. And I was the only child of a sports mad father. So I've sat many days at 5-day test matches. I have a glancing knowledge of soccer and rugby. And that makes me, in the end, a really good fan. Like, I'll go to any sporting event and I'll love every second and every minute of it. But I do not have a team or a favorite player or a favorite league that I follow. I'm a sports dilettante.
Fair enough. So coming back to the way that AT&T has been developing its marketing mix, and in the last few years, there have been some changes in the type of investments that you've been making. But let's maybe just focus on, to start off with, on what we're doing now and how you're adapting your brand positioning with the COVID lockdown.
Sure. So from our broad marketing perspective, I think we identified early on that hard sell was not right for the early weeks of the pandemic. So we shifted very quickly to how we as a brand can help and be useful. Utility was the mantra for us. So we were trying to support and solve, not sell. So whether it was the Keep America Connected pledge, which involved us making sure that there were no terminations due to economic hardship, there were no data overage or so forth. We also quickly pivoted to being able to serve customers. Believe it or not, people still need lines, their phones break. You need to buy one for your grandma so you can FaceTime from afar. So we had to pivot to serving our customers that way. Heavy into digital, we accelerated maybe 3 years of behavior in 2 weeks. Contactless delivery, virtual curbside pickup. So it was really exciting to see all of that. And we capture that in the mantra of how we're keeping you connected. I think we understood that communications and connectivity are what make the world go round. Right. And it was never more so important to be sure that the internet was strong and was resilient for all of our customers. And I'll just say we have an incredible breadth of customers. So we serve first responders, families, small businesses, large businesses. So it was gratifying to be able to talk about those stories and to deliver the facts and the information that people need. The internet has always been like oxygen, but never more so than during the pandemic.
So I suppose in a way, this is sort of merging the, what you've done from a brand point of view with what you've done perhaps in the past from a corporate and social responsibility point of view as well. Do you see that that's a trend that we can expect from a sports sponsorship point of view as well going forwards?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the pandemic has shown to us that in the future, brands will truly be judged by how they treated their customers, but also their employees and communities. We have always had an incredibly strong CSR program. It's focused around education. And so you can imagine that we made, many donations to help educators and families with distance learning. I will also say that we were able to use some of our sponsorship and our sporting properties to help too. So we sponsor the San Antonio Spurs. And what's interesting about that community is that actually very few have access to the internet and to Wi-Fi. So we worked with the Spurs actually to take the in-stadium Wi-Fi and extend it out so that community members could drive in their cars or come and walk and stand in a socially distanced way. And actually they could have free access to Wi-Fi in the car park outside. And I think that's a really nice commingling of, you know, the assets that you can get through a sports sponsorship with how a brand can take the appropriate actions and really help in the pandemic.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So kind of thinking then, you know, for a moment outside of the pandemic and other things that you've been involved in and that AT&T have been involved in, one thing that I think our companies, both Nielsen and AT&T, have as a very kind of strong common link is a strong belief in diversity, and I think that you personally have been taking the lead to a large extent on some of the women in sport agendas at the moment. You know, how do you see that? I mean, is that a personal passion for you? Is that something that other brand marketers and other sponsors you see will be adopting more and more going forwards?
Yeah, thank you for raising that one. Yes, I'm personally passionate about that issue. I've always fought for gender equality. I think that has really been accentuated, though, with my arrival at AT&T. It wasn't quite till I arrived that I was fully able to process the scale and impact of a brand like AT&T. So when we take action, it really has an effect. So what is extraordinary about AT&T, which from the outside could feel like a classic, somewhat middle-of-the-road corporation, is it actually has some quite provocative values. One of those is stand for equality. We were, for example, back in the 1970s, one of the first corporations to recognize LGBTQ employees with equal spousal rights and employee rights. And so it is part of the DNA, unexpectedly so. So I was able to marry my personal passion with the company's values. Just quickly, I'm the chief brand officer. I have a heavy hand in all of the marketing. So we were one of the first advertisers to work with the Association of National Advertisers here in America. And we developed the See Her program. And that simply begins to measure the advertising and marketing and media activities of an advertiser to see whether women and girls are accurately and positively portrayed. And with an attempt to adjust the balance, which obviously was at a deficit. What was great that came out of that work, when you measure something, not only can you measure your progress and hold you accountable, you can actually see the business impact. And it became very clear that diversity is simply good business. And the members that joined See Her, and they're big brands, HP, Facebook, L'Oreal, P&G, AT&T, we were all seeing the same data, and we were creating an inexorable argument that you don't just have to do diversity as a CSR play, it is actually one of the key drivers of growth and business success. And so your question about sports, it was kind of the next natural step, frankly. We've developed See Her in sports. The stat that sort of makes me sad, but it excites me and motivates me is that only 4% of the sports coverage covers women's sports, and yet 85% of female and male viewers want to see the sports, and 44% of athletes are women. So a group of us banded together to see what we could do about that. I will say it is a huge problem because it is a vicious circle. So the sports are not on TV, so they don't get the ratings, so they don't get the ad dollars, so they don't get the sponsorships, so they're underfunded, and so we go on. But I think what's important is that See Her in sports, first it convened the leading voices in sports to tackle the issues. So we got the leagues, we got the networks, we got players, we got the nonprofits, and we got the brands. Secondly, we simply asked for take a micro action. So for example, Wasserman, famous, incredible sponsorship agency, is beginning to, where it is the agent, put equality riders into both male and female athletes, ensuring that there is female representation in support or the agencies that work on the brand sponsorships. That's a great example of one small action that ultimately is going to have a real ripple effect. A brand like us, I spoke to the NBA. We just negotiated our new sponsorship with the NBA last year. And instead of getting the WNBA thrown in for free, which frankly is what happens, I asked to negotiate that as an equal property. And we wanted to value it for all that it brings. It's great access to a key demographic for us. Frankly, it's a really good deal because there are a few brands in that space. And so we became the first non-endemic brand to sponsor all of the 12 WNBA teams. Our logo is on the front of the shirt. Kathy Engelbert, the commissioner, just did a pandemic virtual WNBA draft, and she held up the shirt, and there we were from her home. And frankly, in this era of no live sports, you'll watch whatever sports you can find, and the ratings were pretty darn good. Yeah. So I think that's a great example of how a brand can actually be there at the very beginning and, reap really unexpected results.
Yeah, I completely get what you're saying about the vicious circle. One of the things that we've been doing over the last 3 years now is just making sure that as a matter of principle, we always measure the fan bases and the audiences of women's formats, irrespective of whether that's commercially viable, because if the evidence isn't there to make the investment, then it's very difficult to actually get going in the first place. But do you think, there's some great examples that you just mentioned there. Do you think that we're really moving the needle on this issue? Do you see progress? And are there other kind of brands that you admire that you can point to that say, well, yeah, it's not just us, it's them as well?
Yeah, I think we've got a long way to go. And what's important is that you put one foot in front of the other. And if you've got a steep mountain to climb up, you've got to start somewhere. Yep. Yeah, are we making progress? I don't know that I would go that far. We are seeing green shoots of brands leaning into the issue. I think P&G are a huge equality champion. I think the work they did around the US soccer team and the Be on the Right Side of History, that was very, very public. I think Budweiser are beginning to do some really good work. I think the networks are. So we partnered with NBC in the US that would have done the Olympics coverage. Traditionally, the female athletes actually command a lot of the coverage, more than you would expect, but they were going to ensure that we had 50-50 male-female athletes coverage with See Her Shine. So I think there's some very interesting, meaningful steps being taken. I just want to see the flywheel effect. And I think we probably need a year or so more before I could give you a big thumbs up that this is just running smoothly and we're going to solve the problem.
Yeah, I totally agree. So moving on to how the COVID crisis is impacting and what you're learning as a major brand organization going through this. So thinking about the way that you have been making decisions about selecting different sponsorship properties and the strategy associated with that before the crisis, what you're learning now, how do you think your decision-making is going to change in that respect as we sort of move through to some kind of normalcy beyond this?
Yeah, well, I think necessity is the mother of all innovation. And what we're beginning to see now after the initial shock, I think, is moving from brands and leagues and athletes banding together to do essentially, CSR and community outreach efforts. What I'm really excited about now and will look for in a partner in the future is the inventiveness and the ingenuity that comes when, circumstances are difficult. So I love what brands are doing in the first kind of sporting events that are happening in this new or next normal. So I'm interested in, I thought the idea by Bush where I don't know if you've seen the Bush idea, where we have the first NASCAR race that's going to run in Charlotte on May the 27th. You tweet the Bush logo in your face, and you may well be one of 10 fans who get to be on the car. What I love about that is you're bringing fans into the fanless experience. You're providing fans kind of in a way for the drivers. So I think integrating brands into this new fanless experience it actually is beginning to get really interesting and innovative. We actually were able to get some extraordinary footage and therefore kind of brand engagement out of the NFL draft. We sponsor the Dallas Cowboys.
Yep.
We provide all the wireless and the connectivity for the Jones family. And so we were able to get footage of Jerry calling each draft pick. And obviously that's a hugely emotional moment. You've worked all your life, you get the call, you get the pick, your future is made, you can play on the big stage. It's a hugely emotional, compelling piece of content. And we were able to get that footage and then send that out. And I think that's a real insight into how you can just make the experience, even if you can't be there. And I guess 99% of fans aren't there, right? They're not actually in stadium or at drafts. If you can't be there, you get unique access from the combination of the sponsor and the property. And I think I'm looking for that kind of willingness to invent and experiment out of my future partnerships.
And you were already making some significant investments in eSports and eSports events prior to the crisis as well. I mean, with Cloud9 and a number of other investments that you've made. Do you see those differently now? I mean, obviously, eSports has a different kind of trajectory through the crisis. Are they more important to you? Do you expect more of that, or is it playing the role that you wanted it to play already?
So we have a very robust set of sports properties. You might level the charge that it is older and white. And so we were very consciously trying to reach a younger demographic with esports and also a more multicultural demographic. And so what attracted to us about esports is that we're so endemic. And with the future of 5G, we will naturally be a core part of how gaming broadens, and particularly when esports becomes mobile gaming. And when the latency is that low that you can have those extraordinary experiences just there on your mobile phone, we think it's going to explode even more than it has. So we've always seen the potential. We're thrilled to have experimented early. I will say that, what's great about it is it's relatively low cost. You can do short-term contracts, so you can really experiment and find the right partner. But I mean, it paid out, as you said, during the pandemic, because esports is still live. So, right. So we were happy to not see that part of our portfolio go quiet, as it were. So I really encourage brands to lean into esports. It's fascinating. And I mean, I'm sure you've been in a stadium for live esports. It's just an extraordinary atmosphere, and it is sports like any other sport for the younger generation.
Exactly. So, I mean, unfortunately, we're nearly at time, but just one last question, and that's really for a bit of advice. So, the many of our colleagues working at major sports rights holders who are going to be attending this conference. Obviously, they're all really looking forward to sport coming back. Do you have any advice for them in thinking about their sponsor partners as sport starts to come back?
Well, I think we're all looking forward to sports coming back. As a marketer, I miss the convening power of a live sports moment, whether it's, on screen or in person. As a human, it will be a signal of normalcy. So I am crossing everything. I'll tell you, in my Facebook feed, my friends are already, chomping at the bit and getting overexcited about the Bundesliga this weekend. Right? Yes, there's going to be a lot of eyeballs. But, I think most importantly, I think the advice for us all is that we have to move faster and light a rocket under ourselves to go and engage that younger fan base, because we're all going to be consuming our sports for the next few weeks and months while we're under some form of lockdown through a screen. And so how do you create that kind of a fully engaged on-screen experience? And we have to think around some of the challenges we've had before. Like, you know, in the NBA, why can't you have interviews in the court, in the court between the quarters? Why can't you have choose your own commentator? You don't necessarily have to have the play-by-play from, in our country, Joe Buck. Like, I might want a female commentator. I might want Kevin Hart, the comedian. And so I think we've got to play the long game, because the younger generation's behavior has already changed. The pandemic has proven to us that we can leapfrog all of the challenges and catch up in an instant when we're forced to. And so I think the future is there for us to work together and partner together to go and embrace all those opportunities to make it an incredibly engaging experience for the fan, whether you're there in person, whether you're there under lockdown, or just there watching through your mobile phone.
Well, thanks so much, Fiona. That's really, really inspiring. Thank you very much for spending time with us all here today.